Welcome everybody, this is the SharePoint Patterns and Practices webcast, also known as the Office 365 Developer Webcast. And this time we're going to talk about how can you reference and use external JavaScript libraries from a SharePoint Framework client-side web port. My name is Vesa Juvonen, I'm a Senior Program Manager from Microsoft or SharePoint Engineering in general. And with me we have the BMP core team member, Waldek. Will you do the quick intros as well?
Yes, hi everybody, my name is Waldek Mastikas. I am Office Development MVP, work as a Senior Developer at Anchor, and today I'll be your JavaScript dude.
Indeed. So we're going to go through some slides, and Waldek is going to do the demo around the exact steps to make things happen. Obviously, when you're writing a client-side web part within a SharePoint framework, you quite often reference external libraries like Angular or React or Knockout or whatever, and you need to kind of understand the chosen or what are the models, how do you reference those external libraries within your web part. Before we actually go to the exact material, let's quickly have a look on what the SharePoint BMP is all about. So we always do this as a clarification so that people are not highly confused on what is a SharePoint BMP. So the SharePoint BMP is really a community-driven initiative where the community shares code examples, guidance documentations, and learnings between each other. The SharePoint BMP is not just about the advanced, super academically correct way of doing stuff. It also contains a lot of getting started material because we actually want people to have a stepping stones to learn these things and learn the technologies and how to do development within a SharePoint. The themes within the SharePoint Patterns and Practices are obviously around SharePoint Framework, which is the new stuff, which is currently in the developer preview when this video is recorded. But also it contains a lot of guidance, existing guidance from SharePoint add-ins, also around how to use Microsoft Graph, Office 365 APIs. And the classic themes have been remote provisioning and client-side development. We do have a few different customer case studies, and AKMS SP PnP is the easiest address to member. It's a one single page where you can find all of the resources, the webcast, the videos, the samples, and all of that stuff for you to consume. Now, moving back on to today's agenda. So, how do we actually reference an external library within the client-side web part in the SharePoint framework? And this is quite easily doable, but we want to make sure that we talk about let's say the considerations within this presentation as well. So when would you bundle those libraries in, when not, and what are the exact steps to make these things happen? Since the drop 2 of the developer preview, and again slightly depends when you're watching the video, this capability has been changed. So the original drop, which was started to dev preview, there was some issues around the process of referencing external libraries, and that has been now fixed. And while we head down to the production and the worldwide usage, obviously these things will be working accordingly. But what you need to do is that within your client-side web part solution or in a project, you go to that config.json file where we reference individual JavaScript libraries, and you essentially make a definition of an external library in that config.json project. Then you install the typings, for example, the Angular typings, and typings are really for your TypeScript development. So you're able to then take advantage of the intelligence and all of that development goodness within the TypeScript development. And after the typings have been installed, you import the actual types to your client-side web part file and start using them within your code. Anything I'm missing there, Waldek?
No, that's totally correct.
Yes, it's a relatively simple story and a relatively simple thing. But obviously, if you are not aware of this, you wouldn't know how to make these things happen. So let's quickly have a look on this in practice. So what Waldek has done is that Waldek has already prepared the client-side web part, so created an empty client-side web part using the Yeoman template, and the scaffolding has been completed because that takes a while. And then the follow-up step is that, okay, how do we now reference an external JavaScript library in the client-side web part to make sure that we're able to develop using that library functionalities? So let's jump onto the demo, and we'll get back on the slides in a second.
All right, so in this demo, we'd like to show you the impact of bundling external frameworks in your SharePoint Framework SharePoint Framework client-side web parts that you built with JavaScript. As an example here, I've built a Hello World app part that doesn't use any framework by itself, and then once the project was done, I've added Angular and ng Office UI Fabric. So here you see two references to them, and then what I also do is I create simple module and bootstrap the app. And using the Angular is not trickier, right? The idea is that I reference Angular and that we have a reference to it in a code so that bundling will not remove the reference as an unused reference. Because when you include scripts that you don't use, they are not included in the bundle. So with that, let's build the project. So we go to command line and we call go bundle. And let's have a look when it's done at the size of our bundle. Remember, the web part that we have here is just a plain Hello World web part, which is exactly the same as you would do when you create a new project. So the bundling is done, and now let's go to our Explorer and to the, let me zoom in on that. Let me go to dist where our folders or where our files are. And here, if we look at the Hello World bundle.js, we see that it's 1.4 megs.
Whoa, that's a big one. Yeah.
Exactly, and that's for the web part that doesn't really do anything.
Yep.
This isn't really true, right? If you look at the build that we run, it's debug build. So how would that look like if we ran build for production? So let's call go bundle and then ship. So with that, we will run an optimized build that will also minify scripts, remove all tab spaces and all that. And let's have a look how that's going to influence the size of our bundle, right? So whether that will remove even more of it or what's the win is there. So now the build is done. Let's have a look at the bundles, and they are located in temp, in deploy, and here we can see that it's still 300K. Right, yep. So imagine that you would have few of these on one page. It means that you would have 300K per web part. So your page could be really big eventually. Right?
And that's,
and if
well,
you think
on that one,
it,
that's
in the scope of an intranet, there will be a lot of overhead that you could avoid by referencing both Angular and ng Office UI Fabric from external, URL.
So on that one, that's just kind of clarify the bundling and what does it actually mean if people are not familiar with the term. So what happens here is that we actually get the ng UI Office Fabric and Angular inside of that JavaScript file, right? So we're not kind of referencing that right now from anywhere else, and that's the reason why it's still 300.
So let me let me run an unoptimized build so that we can actually see that both Angular and ng Office UI Fabric are included in the code. Yeah. Right? So bundling is done, and if we go here to dist and to the bundle, and here we search for Angular, so you can see it's here. So here is our Angular 1.5.8, and then ng Office UI Fabric is here as well.
Yeah.
Right, so with that you can see that's a proof that all of that code is included in our code as well, right? And every single time we would build a web part that way, it would contain all of that code by itself. So all of that code is only available to web part. It's not available to another one, right? So what if we could ensure that we don't embed all of the Angular and ng Office UI Fabric inside the web part, but we actually load them from an external place, right? So the way you can do it is really easy, and the great thing about it is it doesn't require you to change anything about your code. The only thing that you have to do for that is go to config.json, and then in externals, add entries for all of the libraries and scripts that you want to load from external URL, as the name says, externals. So here I have the URL for Angular and ng Office UI Fabric. Let me copy them and paste them here. And what you can see here is that we load Angular from this URL and ng Office UI Fabric from this. They are both located on a CDN, but that's not a requirement. It can be your own intranet, it could be SharePoint document library, it can be anything you want, as long as users who use the web part can actually go to that URL and load the script, right? So the script is available to them when they access the page.
Well, the quick comment, a question around that. Why does the Angular has the path and a global name, but ng UI Fabric doesn't?
That's an excellent question, Vesa.
Thank you.
Right. So this has to do with the fact this relates to the format of the script that you are trying to load. So in our case, or when you build a script, you can package it just as a script, or you can package it as a AMD module, CommonJS module, or UMD module. And basically the module type that determines how it can be used and loaded. In our case here, Angular is just plain script. If you run this script on a page, if you load the script on a page, it will add the Angular variable to window on the root scope on your page. And every web part and every single element on a page will be able to do window.angular or just Angular for short, and will be able to use it.
Yeah.
However, the web parts that we build in SharePoint Framework are all UMD modules, right? So everything is scoped and is self-contained. So with that, we are encouraged not to mix anything, or actually not to add too much stuff into the root scope, because imagine that you would have two web parts or three of them on a page, and if every single one added something to root scope, it would be there's a risk that one web part would overwrite another, right? So using the modules architecture, we have a way to isolate all of that and to ensure that different elements on the page won't collide with each other. So that's the whole trick. And our Angular example here is just an example of, let's say, old approach where you would just have global script that would just run on a page, register itself to window, and it would just be there available for everyone on a page, with the risk that if there was another script that would load it, let's say Angular 1.4, that would override Angular that we loaded initially. ng Office UI Fabric, on the other hand, is a UMD module as well. So with that, the only thing that we have to do is actually provide only the URL, and SharePoint Frameworks takes care for us for everything else. Right, so that's the trick. That's the reason why for some scripts we only need the URL, and for others we also need to have the path and name.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense.
Makes sense. Yep.
Yep.
All right. So with that, let me save that. Let me now go back. So with that, we haven't changed anything about our code. Right. So now, let's go back to our code and let's do a gal bundle -ship. So let's create release build of our script, and to see how does referencing Angular and ng Office UI Fabric from external place affects the size. So if you now go back to our Explorer and zoom in, we can see that new bundle. So this is the old one that we had, which was 336K. The new one where we load both scripts from an external place is only 6K.
Yeah.
So does that mean that we have 330K win per head part? Well, yes and no. I mean, we still need those scripts. So whenever you go to a page, there will still be that initial hit. right? But if you think about it from the point of view of a whole intranet, it could be that these scripts are already in the local cache. So
Sure.
with that, you would have exactly that win. You wouldn't need to download anything except the web part, because the scripts would be already available in your local cache, and they could be reused by the user on a page.
Sure. It's a scenario where you have...
This is a great win, and as you've seen, we didn't have to change anything about our code.
Sure.
The only thing that we had to do was to add entries to externals, and the essential part is that if you compare it to our code, let me just open that side by side. So here is our external entries, and here is our web part, and whenever we use Angular here and ng Office UI Fabric here, these names have to match with the names in externals.
Yeah.
Because based on those names, SharePoint Framework will know that you want to load that script from external URL. I guess that's it. So with that, you've seen the impact that bundling external frameworks has on the size of your web parts, and how easily you can influence that when you load these scripts from an external URL.
Cool. Thank you, Waldek, for this one. Let's switch back on the slides and talk about a few considerations when we're building, when we are referencing external JavaScript libraries within client-side web parts. Good. And coming back on the slides, we wanted to go through one kind of a summary slide on the considerations on this client side, or when you're referencing an external library. There's a few things kind of to consider. Obviously, when you are doing web stack development, one of the considerations is that do we actually want to bundle an external JavaScript library to your client-side web part JavaScript files or not? And just to clarify that term, the bundling actually means that if you want to bundle for example, jQuery to your client-side web part code, you will actually get that jQuery included within your client-side web part JavaScript file as well. And if you're referencing, for example, this kind of a generic library like jQuery or a specific version, that's not necessarily the thing what you want to do. Because if you would develop, let's say, a multiple client-side web parts, and all of them are referencing the same JavaScript jQuery version, you would actually duplicate the JavaScript file or the content to all of the individual JavaScript files. And that's not necessarily what you want to do. Maybe there would be, what would be Waldek scenarios where we would actually then bundle an external JavaScript library?
So the one scenario that I could think of is imagine that you are an ISV, right? And you build solution that should work on every intranet that you don't really know how it's built, right? So you deploy the web part and you don't know what else is on the page.
Sure.
So in order for that to work, to ensure that your web part works the way it's supposed to be, you would package everything that it needs into the web part just to be sure that it works. So think about it more as a standard product, standard solution that you would redeploy to different customers, and you wouldn't know what they run and what's already on a page.
That's a good point. And maybe another one, the client-side web part and the SharePoint framework will kind of land on premises as well on the SharePoint 2016 platform. And what if you wouldn't have an external internet connectivity? Because we do know that there are enterprise customers who are running SharePoint locally within their intranet, and they do not have internet connectivity. That means that you are unable to reference the JavaScript file from this centralized location if it's somewhere in the internet.
Right. But then on the other hand, perhaps the approach that you would choose, for example, if you build a lot of apps on your internet with Angular or jQuery, what if you had a central place internally that the web parts could use to load frameworks from? So they wouldn't load them from internet, but they also would not include them in bundles.
Absolutely. It's a great option, no doubt, and most likely you would set up kind of a centralized, let's say, infrastructural site collection where you host all of these JavaScript libraries, and then you always reference them from that location. Obviously, you can do that if you are doing in-house or enterprise development towards that particular deployment. But like Waldek mentioned around the ISV scenario, that's a kind of a slightly separate thing. If you want to truly package the whole thing as a one file which can be used across the world, regardless if it has an internet connectivity, that makes a lot of sense. The kind of maybe the second point which we have on the slide. So there's different consideration based on the used library. So as an example, natively within a SharePoint framework, we in Microsoft we use React. For a lot of people are always asking that, well, is it then the recommendation that you should be doing React? Well, not necessarily. We needed to choose a library, and React was the chosen one after careful considerations, which is aligned then within our development process. You can absolutely use other libraries as well. But what it means is that the React is already loaded for you within the framework. So you don't actually need to kind of bundle that or reference that in as part of your client-side web part because it's already there. Angular, as an example, you need to explicitly cover within your customization, so you need to make sure that that's in the config JSON, so you have that reference available for you within the code. And then there's the additional consideration. The format of the library impacts the actual implementation style. So is the library using kind of the module style, like the modern libraries when you're doing when you are importing individual modules, for example, for your TypeScript, or then is it just a JavaScript library?
Yeah, and I guess we've seen that already during the demo, where we load Angular as a non-AMD module because that's a non-AMD module. So we have to load that script differently than, for example, the other script that we load at, which is the ng Office UI Fabric, and which is available as a UMD module, right? So depending on the type or on how the script that you are trying to load is built, you have to adjust the way you load it in your SharePoint Framework client-side app part.
Absolutely. So you need to, doesn't that kind of mean that you need to understand what the library is all about, which is absolutely always a good practice when you're or using some third-party library from internet. So.
Really, and I think that the first step for you is to whether go to their docs and see if they mention it, or open the code and actually see how it's built, because based on that you can see whether it's AMD, UMD, CommonJS, or no, or just plain script.
Absolutely, absolutely, and obviously, kind of the final pinpoint or final consideration on the slide as well is that the way we then load these files and if we bundle or not, that absolutely impacts the overall page size. And this is a really kind of a big discussion point as well, not just from a library loading perspective. Because obviously, if you have multiple client-side web parts within your intranet front page, and all of them are using an alternative libraries, and they're loading their stuff however they're doing, your page size actually might get pretty big. So there's few considerations on this one. So obviously, you probably don't want to bundle unless you actually need to bundle to do other reasons, so that the JavaScript libraries are referenced from one centralized location. You just have that reference to that external location. The second thing is that you probably want to make sure that your development cycle or development style is aligned. And what I mean with that one is that you probably don't want, if you're doing an enterprise development or building an intranet, you do not want to have all of your web parts implemented different kind of libraries. Because then you will end up in a situation where individual client-side web parts are referencing, for example, one is referencing Knockout, one is referencing React, one is referencing Angular. It works, and that's fine, but the page size, the overall page size which is getting loaded whenever somebody requests a page grows enormously. So having a kind of a consistent way of doing development and a consistent library within a single deployment absolutely makes sense. And, well, obviously that's not a black and white discussion. That's really kind of a, what library it is then and discussion. And that's something what everybody needs to decide by themselves. We in Microsoft, like mentioned, we use React as the library, and that's loaded by default in the SharePoint framework, which is not a bad idea then to use the React. But again, you can use whatever library you want. Anything you want to add there, Waldek, on that one?
No, actually, you've had everything.
Thank you. Cool. But I think that's it. That's it for this particular webcast. We really wanted to kind of walk through how do we reference the client side as the additional libraries from internet, or what are the options of referencing an external JavaScript library, and then have a discussion around those considerations. These things are never black and white, and that's something what I personally want people to learn to think. We quite often actually we see seminars and we see sessions where somebody is saying the best practices for doing whatever. Well, the best practices always depends. It absolutely depends on a particular use case, particular objectives and requirements. Is it a best practice to use Angular? Is it a best practice to bundle? It's not a black and white discussion. It significantly depends on the objectives of the web part. And especially with the PnP guidance and this kind of webcast, we want to make sure that people have the understanding of the chosen path. And that's really important. Not about the fact that do you consider some best practice or not, but rather making a decision by knowing what's the impact of that particular decision. But I think that's it. Any last word from your side, Waldek, in general?
Absolutely. I would encourage everyone to try SPFX and to actually try and see how that would work with the framework that you guys use, and whether you can audit and it works the way it's supposed to, right? Because there are many frameworks available, and there is no way for anyone to test all of them. And I guess that if we try doing that together, it will give us a better view of what does work and what does not work, and if there are any bugs that should be fixed.
Absolutely, yes. Please use the GitHub repos and the techcommunity.microsoft.com and Stack Exchange forums to let us know in the Microsoft side as well if you're running into random issues, and also sharing your learnings. It's not a bad idea to go to the techcommunity.microsoft.com underneath, for example, the SharePoint developer group, and just pinpoint that, hey, I tested this one and it works perfectly using follow-up setup. Because all of that is getting indexed by the search crawlers, the Bing and Google search crawlers, and then whenever somebody is looking into, hey, how would I use whatever random library with SharePoint client-side web parts or SharePoint Framework, they would find that topic. And that's really the key point. Sharing your learnings with others will benefit others as well, and then the others will share their learnings and you will benefit out of them as well. It's the classic story of sharing is caring in the PnP.
Yes.
Cool. I think that's it. Thank you everybody for watching, and we'll come up with a new webcast sooner or later.